Okay. So, Ogham, or you hear people pronounce it Ogham. I'll call it Ogham. And um, disclaimer right up front, I am not a subject matter expert. So this is like following my curiosity and seeing what's interesting, and it's only like one view into Ogham. So, stone trees and origins. Okay. Okay, for me, I don't know. Um, are you familiar with whatsoever? Or maybe you've seen it, yeah. I'm seeing some nodding heads. For me, like my original context was okay, stones, and there's writing on the stones, and it's based on Latin. That was my kind of context or understanding. So these two Ohm stones, they're the Tully Garon or Garon kind of grove, I guess. They're east of Tralee in County Kerry. So in 1848, these were exposed by a big storm out in Kirkgagina, the Dingle Peninsula. So 1848, so kind of warm, bothersome weather that really affected the potatoes. It's all in the same story. And so these were exposed at an ancient burial ground. And then Lord Ventry said, okay, I'd like these to decorate my estate. So Lord Ventry had them taken over further inland in County Kerry, east of Tralee. So they're just a really nice example because you can see the ohm written, right? It's the alphabet that's cut into the stone. And typically, like traditionally, these stones would be markers of like family burial grounds at the boundaries of their lands. And it's typically for these, they're the names. It's like the person and, his father and of this tribe. So it's the stone of this person. So the person's name is already in the genitive case, which is really interesting. So for me, that's Om as I kind of grew up knowing Om. So um, there are five groups of five letters. That's how it's kind of all grouped together traditionally. So there was four groups originally, and the fifth group was added on. The fourth group are the vowels, and be, which is birch tree. So that's the first letter. It's the letter B. So the name is like it's birch tree, and the B is the first sound in the word. So it's like, that's the the system here. And just imagine you can see the stem line is horizontal in this case, but we'd have to flip it around if we're writing ohm uh, on a vertical stem line. So it gets complicated because you can see manuscript ohm that's written horizontally, but that came later. That was like an adaptation um, to relative to the stones. So you've got the edge of the stone and you put a stroke on the right side of the stone, and that's the letter B. Or you can see the next letter has two strokes, and then I guess let's leave a bit of a space, right? So you can see the groupings in that way. So, a very kind of natural way to write down Irish. Um, it's not like our Latin characters. It's a completely different system, which is really interesting. But this alphabet was like phonetically definitely built around the Irish of the day, like primitive Irish into Old Irish. Okay, so how is Omrid? This is news to me because I didn't know how to orientate myself to Om. So Ogham is read like a tree. Ogham is climbed as a tree is climbed. And that's like a translation by Damien McManus, who translated or gave his version of translation of a manuscript. Now, I'm going to pronounce this wrongly or badly, but the Ora kept Nanegish. I believe Walter saw this on a recent trip. So we're going to talk more about manuscripts because for me it's really interesting. It's like it's what the monks wrote down about Om, documenting their understanding about it. Um, so Om is read like a tree, and the tree metaphor goes further. Like each stroke in the letters is called a fleshk, and that would be like a twig. So we've got this tree metaphor going through the idea of Om. It's not all trees, it's not all originally trees, but you have that metaphor going through. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit more about that. So manuscript Om. Like I said, I find it really interesting. Lately, I traveled up to Dublin, not to go to the Royal Irish Academy Library, but I went to the National Library, and I saw manuscripts that are on loan from St. Gallen in Switzerland. St. Gallen is probably an Irish like monk who set up, a monastery or whatever. St. Gallen is now a city in Switzerland. And those manuscripts are back in Ireland, some of them for the first time in like 1,000 years. So it's really amazing. These are manuscripts on vellum. It's like young calf leather, and then intricate inkwork. So the Book of Ballymote is it's up in Dublin, and it's a collection of like different manuscripts, different copies of older texts. So these texts originally maybe went back to the 8th century, for example, but what we have now physically are copies, like reproductions from maybe the 14th century. Just look at it. Like, isn't that beautiful? And the first one, you can see that very first letter B, from what I can make out, be is written three times, three strokes. So they're going from the left over to the right. Next letter, next letter, next letter. But there's all these variations of Om. Like, so what we see on stone is maybe a standardized form, but look at all these kind of intricate versions of Om that are being suggested. So on Lower Om is how I'll pronounce it, is one part of the Book of Ballymote, and it documents over 100 different Om alphabets. So I'll talk a little more about that again. And then just after that in the Book of Ballymote is the Oracept Nanekis, the Scholar's Primer. And as far as I understand, it's the oldest Irish grammatical reference that we have. So it's explaining Irish grammar. So it's like Astor reference back, but a bit older. And they took the Om that we know from stone, written vertically from the bottom upwards, and they made it go left to right. So there's an adaptation there. I'm very visually based, and it's hard for me to understand these changes, but that's simply up from vertical to left. Okay, so these manuscripts have mythic claims on the origin of Om. So think about it, they're writing originally in like, let's say, the 8th century, and the copies are being made in the 14th century. They're making claims of who came up with like where is it from? And we actually like we don't know, you know. But for me, it's like the monks were myth creating. Um, so in your reading practice after this, you'll be reading about Phineas Farsig, who appears in Irish mythology and is said to have invented 10 years after languages spread from the Tower of Babel. Okay, so that's one origin story. And right next to it in the Book of Banimod, as far as I can understand, although I haven't studied the manuscript itself, I just find it really intriguing. The Lower Ogham uh, claims that it was the god Ogma who invented the
I'm
alphabet,
doing
right?
a listening to a
So
thing here.
I
You go
find
on.
this interesting. So the translation from the book Lower Ogham here, I'll read it out. This, moreover, is the first thing that was written in Ogham. Beh, 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 beh. The birch, 7 times. Written to convey a warning to Lu, son of Etlu. It was written respecting his wife, lest she should be carried away from him into fairyland. To wit, 7 bees or beh in one switch of birch. Thy wife will be 7 times carried away from thee into fairyland or into another country, unless birch guard her. On that account, moreover, beh, birch, takes precedence, for it is in birch that Om was first written. I find this really interesting. So they're saying that the first letter, be, which means birch, was the first letter ever written in Ogham, and it was written on Ogham, and it was written to convey warning to Lu. So Lu is a an old like Celtic deity. We've got mythology about Lu, and I hope we'll speak more about Lu for next month's Lunasa workshop, right? So that's really interesting. It's like the Tishel Ginneduc. It's like the genitive. It's creativity itself. It's Om being written on birch. The first letter being written is birch, and it's been written 7 times as a warning. So really interesting. So Ogma, I've never seen it, but this is at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Ogma. And Ogma's name, from what I've read, comes from the Proto-Indo-European root, which means to cut. So if that's the case, Om itself means that it's a cutting, it's to cut. I'm not sure if that has academic roots. So there's a really interesting video that I can share, and it's created by Maynooth University. It's hosted on Professor David Stifter's channel on YouTube, and it's got different academics talking and giving information around this project where they did 3D scans of Ohm, and you can browse those scans on your computer and kind of, turn the stones around, for example. It's not just stones. Like stones are where Ohm was kept the best, but like there's Ohm to be found on handles of like knives, for example. But Professor Catherine Forsyth from Glasgow in this video talks about possibly being more an alphabet written on sticks first, right? So you like flatten out a stick with your knife, make different sides on it, and then make notches into the stick. So much more based on wood first of all, and then adapted into stone later on. Okay, so that's interesting. And I'm interested in the origins. You can have all these claims and nobody really knows. And I don't know of Sean O'Boyle, although he was prominent about Irish music, had a radio show in the time, and he wrote this book. Now, it was published posthumously after his death. His sons put together the last 3 chapters, from what I understand. And what I've read in Sean's argument is that like Ohm is phonetically taught out alphabet, and it was designed for Irish. So that's it, all fits. And whoever came up with Ohm was probably familiar with the Latin alphabet. Like it was informed by, okay, this makes sense. You have consonants, you have vowels. They were following a pattern that had been figured out by civilization. But O'Boyle asks, why would you invent an alphabet of notches if you're already familiar with the Latin letters? Like, why would you do that? And his claim, from what I understand, is that these characters or these symbols existed perhaps before being assigned to letters, assigned to pronunciation parts of or phonetics of the language. And he claims that because music and the bardic tradition are so closely intertwined in Ireland's history that maybe Ogham was more like a musical notation, a way to store music, and then maybe it was transposed into like a written language then. Okay, so who knows? But there is definitely that idea of Om as an invocation or like symbolically. So again, this is a closer screenshot from that same manuscript earlier. And I mentioned they have over 100 types of Om. So you've got tree Om, but it lists bird Om, it lists color Om, agricultural Om, art Om. And what that means is like, for example, the trees, right? The first letter is be, birch. So you're using the names of trees to give names to the letters. But in bird ohm, it's a bird that's used to give a name to the letter B, and so on, and so forth.
Yeah.
And going back to the bardic tradition, um, it's said that in their training, the bards or the poets would have to learn 50 types of ohm or like lists of words, right? Uh, in each of their first 3 years of training. So I added just a note here, just like imagine somebody told you, okay, your family name, your tribal name, the first letter in your name is Oak. Okay. And I think we can like pick up on that kind of symbology or imagery even today, right? So you go, oh wow, the first letter of my name is Oak, and so on and so forth. So for people like using or invoking Om in the past, I think they would have been more in tune with the meaning of what does that name of that letter convey to them. It's not just a label. Maybe it just became just a label later on. So that's Om as an invocation. So I'm going to finish here, and I want 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes after I finish this site, Om, ogh.am, it's a really nice little tool where you can type in, letters, your name, whatever. And I would say that Om is your living tradition. Like the monks claimed it centuries after it started to be used, for example, in burial plots. It's deeply symbolic. There's all these different types of Om, even though there's like a standardized type and with names of the letters. And it's intertwined with Gaelga's evolution. It goes back to primitive Irish, Old Irish. So it has grown with us. And David Stifter in that video gives the example where you've got names that have evolved over the centuries and their spelling in Ogham changes. So it's kind of a relic, or it shows us how these names have actually changed over time. Okay, if you've got another screen, if you can do, or just write it down, go to OGHAM, and I would suggest do it letter by letter. And why not use this time right now to write out even the first letter of your name, not even your full name, because that gets complicated. But so be, it's the stroke on the side of the stem line, B, or E for Owen. Okay. And as we've learned, you go from the bottom, you climb the ohm like a tree. So you've got your orientation. So every time I add a new letter, it's adding it to the top. Okay. So if you've got time now, just find what letter your name starts with and just write that out. And you can come back and study and play with it here. It's a lovely kind of interactive tune, isn't it? That you can adapt and see. Yeah, there's definitely like tables of letters too, for sure. But for me, this is a nice playful way to learn. Oh. Okay, Gurmag of I'll stop the recording.